Welcome to Booked, the bookstore education podcast brought to you by the American Booksellers Association. In this episode, we'll be listening to Anticipating the Plot Twist, Strategies for Goal Setting and Prioritization in Bookselling, a session that was presented at Winter Institute 2025 in Denver, Colorado.
Thank you all for coming. This is, I believe, the last workshop session of the week. Woohoo! Yeah, I see some hands up. Thank you all for staying long enough for us to hear what we might have to share with you. And just to make sure you're here to hear about strategies in goal setting to help with prioritization in books. Did I say goal selling? Goal setting. Oh my gosh, I'm tired. Anyway, goal setting and prioritization in book selling. Just the usual housekeeping stuff that you've been hearing all week. In case you haven't learned this, the slides are already in the app. I've been looking at them myself as I go along, and the handouts will be available as well. We really encourage you to fill out the session survey. It takes less than 30 seconds, and you might even get a surprise if y'all fill it out. So, a little self-interest there. The recordings will be on BookWeb and BookEd. We ask you to silence all your sound-making devices, please. And as you know by now, there's going to be a mic available at the end, a couple of people with mics. So please, if you have a question, make sure you do speak into a mic. We have our antitrust guidelines that you've been hearing all week. Although we are a very collegial community, we are not allowed to discuss price or pricing policies, boycotts, or dividing up the market. And I also want to thank Ingram for making this entire week-long event possible and including this session. Alrighty, so one second while I grab my thing here. How many people here have experienced some kind of event or action related to your book selling that sent you off the rails and caused you to, show of hands. Okay, then you are in the right place. We're going to talk today about how you can cultivate a proactive approach to book selling and shift from crisis management to strategic planning. So that's what we're all about today. And here's a little outline of how we're going to get there. But before we start, we're going to go into introductions, brief introductions. So my name's Amy Hall. I own Hudson Valley Books for Humanity in Ossining, New York, an hour north of New York City. We're each going to share one little plot twist that happened in our own stores. I'm only 3.5 years old, and I'd say pretty much everything I do is a plot twist at this point. But a big one for us was we're mostly used books in my bookstore, and in the very beginning, I took every book that anybody ever brought in, including yearbooks and written in journals and like half ripped out other kinds of books. And of course, I didn't know any better. And 6 months in, I finally developed a set of guidelines for the kinds of books I was willing to take and those that we were going to reject. So that's sort of a plot twist that actually set me on the right foot.
I'm Sarah Luce-Look. I co-own Karis Books and More. We're in Decatur, Georgia, which is really closer to Atlanta, Georgia, if that makes sense to you. We're a 50-year-old feminist bookstore. I've been at Karis for over 30 of those 50 years. And I was thinking, we were talking about plot twists, and I was like, well, is it about when Amazon.com started? Or something more recent, which there's so many plot twists, because I was thinking also about, for us, more than strategic planning, we do a lot of what I would call micro planning, which also means we kind of do a lot of crisis management and catastrophizing. And it's often we try to get to the worst case scenario and then try to make plans about that. So when I think about an example, they're all interconnected. When I'm like, well, this started here and then this happened, which is, so I was thinking about in 2013, when we had absolutely no money and we couldn't pay our staff or ourselves barely, and we couldn't pay our sales tax, and I was getting ready to go take care of my elderly father who I was going to have to move to a nursing home, but I didn't even know that yet. And literally that week that I was getting to go out of town, and I was our only full-time employee and the only one who knew how to do an Ingram order, we got graffiti, like homophobic graffiti on the side of our building. And then we got called in by the sales tax people who finally were like, you have to pay your sales tax. And then I went to have to go take care of my father and found out after I thought I was going to be there a week, I was gone for almost 2 months, which was really hard. And I'm saying all that because we had to make a lot of interim plans, but it also sort of kickstarted the rest of what started happening, which is we owned our building. Everyone thinks it's great to own our building. Well, you know what happens when you don't have any money? You borrow against your building, and then you can't get out from under it until you sell your building. So it sort of kept, things kept going and getting worse and worse. And because we're used to not making any money, we also, I'm looking at our notes and I'm like, about budgeting and strategic planning. I'm like, who can have a budget when you don't have any money? So anyway, that is to say, eventually we got to the place where we are now, which is we have cash flow. We still don't budget very well, but we have money to pay our bills. We have more money than we've ever really have. We have the largest staff we've ever had. We have 6 full-time people between our organizations. We're also a hybrid, so we have a nonprofit that does our programming. But when we went to make our move, we had to decide to sell our building. It then took another 4 years for that move to happen. So it was 4 years then of what, again, I would call micro planning, which is, one step of the way, which is what we did. And we eventually moved.
Thank you.
I'm Dan Mayer. I'm the director at Seminary Co-op Bookstores in Chicago. We are a 60-plus-year-old bookstore and a 20-year-old bookstore. So we have 2 bookstores in the Hyde Park neighborhood in south side of Chicago. When I was told to share a plot twist just now, the first one came to mind was COVID. COVID was a really big plot twist that was probably in none of our emergency preparedness manuals. In case of a global pandemic, do this. So that was a pretty big plot twist and really required that all of us look at our mission and our plan and see what were our priorities, what we could cut back and what we couldn't cut back, and how to pivot, which became everyone's favorite word for about a year, and how to do things differently. A more practical, more common plot twist that I've experienced is when our accountant about 3 weeks before the end of the year goes, well, I made a mistake, and instead of ending the year $175,000 in the black, you're going to end the year $250,000 in the red. And you've already done your budget. So that's happened more than once. And over a long period of time, otherwise I would have fired that accountant immediately. But your numbers are not always what they appear to be, and how do you adapt, and where's your plan that you use to sort of do that, to make those changes and define where do you go? What are the first steps? What are the long-term, midterm steps, and what are how do you deal with that both on the day you hear and 3 weeks later?
I'm Jules Wintersbach. I'm the owner of Hive Mind Books. We are a queer bookstore in Brooklyn, New York. We were a traveling bookstore last year and then opened up a brick and mortar 4 months ago. I've been a bookseller for 20 years. I also worked for a nonprofit that ran a large-scale book festival that did very professional strategic planning, and I loved it because I got to see kind of the inside of all of that, and now have adapted it for my different staffs at various bookstores. I've worked at a few different places. My plot twist is really recent. Because we just opened 4 months ago, our plan was to hire staff at the end of March. And in February, I've been really sick this month. This is the best I felt actually all month. And I was the only person working the shop. And so it was either close for I was sick for about 2.5 weeks, or move our plan up faster. Because we had been planning and we'd already done some budgeting and we knew how many hours we were going to give and what we wanted our hours to be, it made it a lot easier to act fast in that moment of crisis and be like, okay, well, this wasn't ideally what we wanted, but we know we can do it. We know we'll be okay. We know exactly how much money we have and need and all of that sort of thing. So I was glad that we had a plan and a spreadsheet somewhere for this.
Oh my gosh. That's okay. Thank you all. Wow. That's absolutely crazy. So just to get us into this whole idea of moving from crisis management to, what did we say earlier, to strategic, operational level, we're going to just talk briefly about what actually a strategic plan is. And, many of us have worked in corporate, and we may have seen, this word bantered about, but it's really just a way to define, spell out, write out your organization's goals, your bookstore's goals, and create an action plan against those goals. It can be done on an annual basis. It can be done on a 3 to 5 year basis. So I think it looks different for any different business. And, there we go. There's an actual kind of definition. And I think, Jules, you were going to talk us through a little bit about how you think about strategic planning.
For sure. I love strategic plans. I love them. They, you can adapt them to, like she was saying, to be as long or short as you want them to. I think kind of knowing what scope you want is really useful. As I said, I've done like professional strategic planning with a nonprofit agency. They did it twice. They hired a consultant to come in. They were, interviewing every stakeholder they possibly had. It was a really, there were committees. It was a long, complicated process. I have very happily simplified it for myself and a couple of different staffs that I've worked with. And now as the new bookstore, we are actually in strategic planning mode right now because we're through the holidays and we're like, okay, what does our future look like? So it just forces me to like drill down and kick the tires on my ideas and my presumptions about the store and what we're doing. So here are my steps. This is what I do. You can Google strategic planning. There are a lot of different ways to approach it. There's a lot of jargon around it, and that can confuse me, so I try to avoid jargon. I start with knowing our scope and timeline, and then also who on your team is going to participate in like your real planning. I mean, everybody has a different size staff. Right now, for us, it's 2 people, so it's the 2 of us doing it. But if you have a larger staff, if there are key leaders you want involved, at a real like analytical level and really helping you like really write the plan, then identify that. But so for me, it all starts with like your vision and your mission, knowing what you're doing and why. It's like, if you have a mission statement, evaluate it. And that's where I began, is like, does this mission still ring true? Does it not? Is this something I'm going to need to explore in my plan? Maybe I need to rewrite my mission as part of my plan. But I would start there, just like knowing what you do and why, and then gather information. And so this is where you like talk to stakeholders. Who are your stakeholders? Your staff. So you can survey your staff. You can survey customers. You might survey publishing partners or people you work with in the community, because you want to get a sense. It's like a SWOT analysis: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, right? Like you want to like pull back and take a big picture look at what you're doing, what your store is doing, and then be open to an impact that you might not realize you have. You probably know a lot of the things that are going wrong already. You probably, but getting feedback from others can be really useful. They'll see things you don't see. This is also a really good opportunity to get your staff involved so that they feel investment in all of this. But you want to do like a really big just information gathering and a SWOT analysis. And then you have to take all that information and like kind of analyze it. So for me, that's where my like committee of leaders have come in handy. Like if I have people at my store who like, okay, you 2 managers are the strategic planning committee, we're going to review all of this information we've gathered and see what the patterns are. Let's see what keeps coming up again. Are there things that surprised us here? Are there things that, opportunities we didn't realize we had? So that's a process. I'm going to try to go through this quickly. I don't want to take up too much of the time. I'm sorry. But really going through all of that, and it takes time. Like all of this takes time, and I know none of us have time, but like a minute of planning now is worth like an hour of chaos later. So it does take time to really review all of that, and again, reviewing it against your mission, and is this fulfilling what I think I'm doing, and what are we actually doing? And then you set your goals. And then you come down and say, okay, out of this, like all of this, what are the patterns? What are the big things? What are the things that we're going to work on? What's the direction we're going to go in? And so, yeah, you set your goals, and then from there, figure out, okay, I have this big thing I'm going to do. How am I going to get there? You're just drilling down, right? Like you're doing that big information gathering. You're seeing, okay, here are the patterns. Here's what's coming up. Here's what we're going to go after. And now, again, it takes time, but it's like, here's how we're actually going to do it. Like, here's the strategy, here's the like specific little tactic to hit the strategy. Like I'm, trying to grow my like daytime foot traffic right now, so like my tactic is going to be, I'm going to have a seasonal drink menu and we're going to run specials. And, so it's like, that's how I'm going to get to that piece. So you drill down into that. And then it's also really important to know what your metrics are. I was in a great session about KPIs yesterday. I don't know if anybody else was in that. Loved it. Your key performance indicators. You have to know. So like, how will you know when you're successful? What are you measuring to determine like the impact of this thing that you said is the thing you're going to do to hit your goal, right? So know your metrics and your KPIs. I set a month by month timeline. Like I take now, like here are all these big goals. Because this is the other thing is that you can't do everything at once. So like, if these are the things I want to do, what's the realistic timeline for it? And when can it all happen? And then evaluate your plan with regular check-ins with staff, with your community and stakeholders to evaluate impact and success. So that in a very quick nutshell is the process that I go through.
Thank you so much. Now, we've got two booksellers here who've been in business for a really long time. Do either of you have anything to add to that?
So I would add a couple of things. One, it is really not about the plan that is finished. It is about the process of planning. So there are a lot of places that have a beautiful plan sitting on a shelf collecting dust. It is really about the process of digging in and learning these things and participating. It's a great way of, I don't like this word, but team building, because you're really getting people together to talk about shared goals and talking about your mission and talking about all the things that you need to do together. So I've had people who this takes, shortest time is usually 6 months, longest time is 2 years. Because if it takes you longer than 2 years, then you almost have to start over again. But it really should not take you 2 weeks. It probably will not take you 3 months. It'll take you time, and you need to be patient and understand it's really about the process and what you learn along the way, not the document with the pie charts and the graphs and the really impressive list of people you interviewed. It's the process of all those people you talked to and ways in which you analyzed your business and had light bulb moments along the way. The only other thing I wanted to say was that a lot of people in doing this focus on the mission. I believe in focusing on the mission, but I also really believe in focusing on budget, because where you spend your money is the best way of figuring out how you live your mission. So I really tie strategic planning to mission. Every year when I do a budget, I look at the mission and say, is this really achieving our goals that we talked about in our planning process? So, there's sometimes a disconnect. We're spending all our money just to sort of keep afloat. Well, can we spend $500 on something that's part of our goals in our strategic plan? Can we spend $1,500? How can we sort of keep the lights on and look at the objectives that we developed through the strategic planning process and do both? There are incremental ways of doing that, and you'll feel much better that you're making progress by tying it to your budget rather than just to activities. Because to your activities, then how do you pay for the people? So it comes back to budget. So just really don't do this in a void, not looking at your budget. Look at you, even if you are only halfway through the process, you can still look at your budget and your goals or your mission, or reflect on your process and have the two align.
Dan, not to put you on the spot, but can you give an example of how you've maybe pivoted a little bit because of the budget situation?
Well, we all have sort of dream projects of things we'd like to do, and they just sort of never, ever get done. So I'd love to have a program in the schools, but I don't have the money for, the person to go and contact the schools and do all that. It would take me, I'd have to find, $40,000 to pay someone $20,000 and then pay for the books and pay for the outreach and pay for the marketing. Well, maybe I don't start with a full-fledged program. Maybe I find 2 schools and I start with 2 schools and I do it incrementally, because doing outreach to young people is a part of our mission. Just taking things in a bite-sized way when you have something that's not about the day-to-day, and understanding that it fits into the day-to-day of what you're doing, but it just may not be apparent when you're looking at a budget, but you need to have the discipline to do that. So we've done that several different times where a staff member comes up with a really good idea, but there's a budget aligned with it. And we have to wait, and then we incorporate it into the budget and put a portion of it in there and do it as a test. And that's really a way of moving our mission forward. So that's sort of a generic answer, but we do it every year in some small ways with different programs, our outreach, or sometimes around. We've done this year around with a project around sidelines. We do not sell a lot of sidelines, so this year we said one of our goals was to increase sidelines. So we said, well, what's a reasonable budget? What can we put towards sidelines? What are reasonable sidelines for us to try with this budget? And really invested in it because it was sort of a diversification of income that was part of our larger mission. So there are lots of ways maybe you're doing this, but a strategic plan gives you a way of sort of doing it more intentionally and sort of feeling like you're not doing it all at once.
Okay, and then just to play devil's advocate, I think, Sarah, at the beginning, you said that you're a little more kind of seat of your pants, or I don't know if that's the right term, but do you want to give a contrasting idea here?
Sure. So I was going to say, so we do a lot of trying to anticipate what's coming next, as well as be responsive to what's happening in our world and in the big world, because I think of plot twists as both interpersonal and global and local and all of that. And we, being me, have participated in several strategic planning sessions over the many years at Keras. And I'm also at the point where I'm like, I don't want to do another strategic planning meeting because we often create plans and don't implement them. And then I just feel like I've wasted time, or for whatever reason, someone doesn't feel heard. Back when search conferences were popular, like 25 years ago, and we did a whole weekend-long search conference, and I think that's sitting in a folder somewhere. Because after we did that, one of our co-owners left the business, and things fell apart in a different way. It's like you just can't anticipate all the things, or you can anticipate, but you don't want to see them coming. So I think we do a lot of micro planning, and because we're also a feminist business, we do a lot of processing. So, and we try not to get stuck in that process, but I think the value of that is that we really, really talk to each other all the time. So it's sort of like we're planning as we go, and like I said, trying to anticipate what is happening. But I will also say that one of the things that we did when we were trying to decide if we were going to move, and then we did move, is we did sort of a listening tour of different nonprofits and organizations that we were involved in, and activist groups and academics and all our customers. And we also did a sort of semi-formal survey. And the main point on the survey was how important parking is. And we were in a neighborhood, and we were in a place where we had 4 parking spots, but the greater neighborhood did not have great parking. We were like the only business that had its own parking, but we had 4 parking spots. And when we moved to our new space, and there was a giant, and I mean it's got 100 parking spaces behind us that we share with the college that we now are adjacent to their campus. And we had this parking lot, and it was like, we just have to post a picture of this parking lot. And it's true. Our business is actually much, much busier than it ever was. And a lot of it is just about parking. And we did a survey, and we didn't quite believe it, even though they told us that that's what they wanted.
All right, thank you so much. So what we're hearing is we're getting a lot of input, both from employees, from community members, et cetera, stakeholders, as they might say. So, earlier, I think, Julie, you had mentioned this idea of mission, and many of us might wonder what the difference is between a strategic plan and a mission, but really you said something which I thought was a great way to encapsulate it, knowing what you do and why you do it. And I feel like that alone, if you don't do a formal strategic plan, just always keeping in mind what it is you're doing and why you're doing it as the kind of overriding guideline to all of your decision making. Making sure your employees understand that too is really important. Do you, either of you, I know Dan earlier you were talking about sort of this budget mission overlap. Is there anything else either of you wanted to add to that?
Well, I would just add, sort of drawing a little bit of a different distinction, the difference between a business plan and a strategic plan. They're very similar. They sound very similar. Most of the time what I see is people do a business plan when they start a business. Like, how would I ever run this as a business? And they start doing a plan before they open their door. A strategic plan is something you do more often when you want your business to be ongoing and you want to solve problems that arise along the way of operating a business. So they look very similar. There are a lot of resources for both that look similar, but and they have elements that are the same, but one may tell you how to start your business and one may tell you how to keep going as a business. So think of it that way. Maybe some of you did a business plan when you started, even if it was on a piece of paper, and just sort of like someone walked you through a couple of steps of a SWOT analysis, or you did a very simple budget, or figured out how to come up with the money to get the place started. Those are all elements of a business plan. So you take those, and that can be one place to start a strategic plan, is just looking at those sort of simple planning documents you may have done, just sort of even in an ad hoc way to start your business and continue to formalize that into a plan or a strategic plan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think about like both mission and strategic plan in general, just as like it gives me some guideposts and some guidelines, because there is so much that gets thrown at us every single day that like having something to go back to, something to help orient myself, just gives me like somewhat of a sense of control, even if it's an illusion. But just it helps me make decisions too. If like an event is thrown my way and like, do you want to host so and so, or will you do this offsite event? And it gives me a second to think and say like, well, does this actually align with the things I've mapped out for myself and my business for the next year or whatever it is, and with my mission, right? And I feel like we are, as business managers and owners, just like constantly having to make decisions. And I think that looking at a strategic plan is a tool that can really help you, like prioritize and make those choices in the moment. Also helps with some of the crisis management, I think.
And Julie, what's your mission statement?
I was writing it again this morning. We're very much, like I said, we opened 4 months ago. And so we sat down in January, my co-owner and I, and talked about, okay, what has been the response? What have we said we're doing? What are we doing? Right now, it's long. I'm going to read it. I wrote it an hour ago. It's uplift queer and trans readers by operating a sustainable bookstore and quality coffee shop. Provide a relaxed, comfortable space to spend time, engage in community, and discover books from a wide selection of literature by queer and trans writers. That's a mouthful. I'm still working on it, but I'm in my process, so it's okay.
Great.
And I've been vulnerable now and shared that with all of you.
No, thank you. It's and do either of you have a mission statement? What's yours?
So our mission is together with Kara Circle, which is our programming nonprofit partner. We exist to foster sustainable feminist communities, to work for social justice, and to encourage the expression of diverse and marginalized voices. Nowhere in there does it actually say anything about making money or selling books. And we think of that as twofold, in that our nonprofit is doing all this programming and our bookstore is selling books, and they're both doing that to reach these other goals, which are for the greater good.
And I love that, because the mission really does help you, your employees, anybody make those snap decisions. It helps you, when you face that plot twist, determine, okay, wait a minute, if we go this way, does that fulfill this mission, or do we need to go this way? And does it help us stay on the right path? That's what it's all about. All right, let's keep it going. So we keep talking about involving and informing our staff. I mean, they are at the front lines of all of this work. So for some of us who have really small teams, like I know for myself, I have 2 adults and 2 teenagers, all of whom are very part-time, and there's me and my husband. We're never all together in the same place. And so if I were going to go through this process, I would have to I would say that the 3 adult staff and my husband and I get together twice a year for a drink, and we talk about stuff. And that's the only time we're all together in the same place. I wouldn't call that a strategic planning session, but it's really hard to keep the store going and have all of us in the same place at once. So how do y'all do that?
When I've had larger staffs, I like 12 people or 20 people. When I say large, I know people have much bigger bookstores than that, but I've started with an anonymous survey to get feedback from staff in their own time. It gives them time to consider the questions. I'm asking them to think deeply about the store, its operations, the community, everything we've been doing. So I start with an anonymous survey, and then I have that core team that's going to review all the data with me. But I do have like at least one staff meeting with everybody to say, okay, here are the patterns that we're seeing. Here's what came out of this. And to kind of have an open discussion of like, and so here's where we're seeing is maybe a direction for us to grow or for us to try, and just to get their feedback. And I leave it open as like, we're not necessarily going to make all the decisions right here in this meeting, but here's what we received, let's talk about it. And then just continue to drill down from there, then like meet with a committee. And it's time consuming. I don't know how else to say it, but that's how I've approached it.
So I would do this with staff with 3 questions at a time. Ask 3 open-ended questions and ask them to think big picture. Staff rarely get asked to think big picture. So ask them to think big picture and try to envision what would be a better way of doing this or that. What would be, if in a perfect world, what would be a way of doing more marketing? In a perfect world, what would our social media look like? In a perfect world, how often would we, what would our inventory look like? So I ask them sort of big picture questions. Some people respond to it with the very narrow detail still, and some people do sort of thrive on the idea of being asked a big picture question because they don't get asked that very often. And also, if you have a very small staff, although I would focus on the staff, I'd quickly go beyond the staff. I would go to other stakeholders in the community, other bookstores, other people in the industry, other businesses in your neighborhood, different people who can be resources to you in different ways. Someone at a local college, someone at the chamber, someone in the tourism bureau. There are lots of different people in your community who care and want you to be there. So think broadly about all the people who are invested in you and ask them questions. And you're not going to ask them questions about inventory probably, but just in terms of your profile, what you do in the community, how you can be a good partner in the community, what kind of collaborations you can do in the community, what do they value most in the bookstore. You can ask open-ended questions, and that's really the place to start. The detail stuff comes later. And it really flows down, and it's much easier to do. It sounds harder, but it's really much easier. It's really that sort of broad SWOT, big picture kind of thinking that inspires us and really motivates you to get started and get going in the first months of doing this work.
I can imagine there's a tremendous sense of pride when an employee, for example, gives you an idea and you actually act on it, and they're responsible for some new direction you go in. What about the employee that gives you a big idea, maybe does it repeatedly over every time you ask a question and you never act on it? How do you set expectations or manage expectations for employees like that?
Well, I explain why we can't do that idea and then encourage them to come up with another one. And I work with them before they come up with the second idea and say, well, maybe let's scale this way, or maybe let's think of it a little differently. So, sometimes people come up with big ideas because they don't know the scale at which you can solve a problem. But if they know the scale, they can usually find a way of moving through that. Our bigger issue, and maybe this is other people in the room, is we have a lot of people come with great ideas, and then we change staff. And the person who came up with the idea is not there anymore, and we're sort of scratching our head going, do we do this? How do we do this? So, there's also an issue of, when you have turnover on staff, and how do you do these ideas? Or if your staff shrinks or grows is not a problem, but if your staff shrinks, how do you sort of follow up on those ideas? And again, it sort of requires you have a plan and see what you can scale up to and what you may have to, look at the year in terms of quarters and say, I'm sorry, that was a great idea, and we said we'd do it in quarter 1, but now it's going to be quarter 3. And then you sort of find ways of doing it then.
I was thinking about, we have some very, very committed staff staff folks who have been with us for a long time, but they only work, sometimes 4 or 8 hours a month. But they are very dedicated to Caris and dedicated to our mission. And for us, it's been trying to find the balance, especially, I will say, since COVID, so our business and our Caris is hybrid. So we have a nonprofit and a technically for-profit bookstore, and then our staff now is hybrid. So some folks work from home a lot and hardly in the store, and some folks work almost only in the store. And during COVID, we started having Zoom calls with our full-time staff, and it became clear that we had to make a distinction for us about, I would say, more stakeholders actually in the store and with our nonprofit programming for the folks that were making the actual decisions. So I have a business partner, so the co-owner and I and the executive director of our nonprofit, we're the leadership. We make overarching decisions. We do the what I would call the strategic planning and the visioning, but we rely on our full-time people to actually help make that really happen. And we communicate with our part-time staff, but we've also had to sort of get clear with our part-time staff that even though they want more say, they're not really present enough to make those decisions with us. And that has been a real struggle for us, but we've gotten a little more clear recently about that.
You can't have everybody be a decision maker. I think that's true. So, we were talking earlier, about, well, how do you make some of this stuff actually happen? And how do you use your strategic plan to help shape the actions you're gonna move forward in your store, and also the reactions you're gonna have to implement, especially when there's a plot twist. So one of the strategies has been, to diversify revenue streams. And I don't know how many people were in the session. I want to say it was yesterday with Baldwin and Co., where we learned about his Airbnb and his podcasting. And I was like, wow, that really takes diversification to the nth degree. At least for me personally, a single store, no other external businesses. There are different ways that we diversify internally just to keep ourselves busy. And not busy, healthy. One of the things that I always said from the very beginning was, if we can get people in the store, they will buy something. And so we can't necessarily rely on foot traffic because we're a little bit off the beaten path in our town. But that's why we have a lot of events. We have tons of events. And so we've set up the store up so there's a lot of space and movable furniture. We sell a lot of different kinds of sidelines, but they're all focused on artisan, local, environmental, social justice, those themes, which are part of our mission. So we won't take just any old sideline, but they have to have a purpose, a distinctive purpose. And so anybody who walks in the store still recognizes, whether they're looking at our books or looking at our sidelines, what we stand for. We rent the space out to people. We've had a wedding, we've had birthday parties, et cetera. And we do have school partnerships ourselves. And so, and we just started a membership program. So all of these things are ways to drive revenue so that when something doesn't go as planned, for example, when the weather hits, and we have to cancel, as we did a couple weeks ago, 3 what we thought were going to be big events all in a row, which probably, eliminated $2,000 or $3,000 in revenue just for a weekend, which is a lot of money for us. We at least have other mechanisms in place to get people to drive some business. So, are there any other examples of diversifying revenue streams that people might want to?
Sure. And I can also say that, for me right now, our planning process is helping me really focus on what those revenue streams are going to be. Diversifying is great, but I feel like, it's like, oh, I should be working with schools. Oh, I should be trying to do these bundle ticket events. I should try to do this, this, and this. And part of my intention right now for myself and my small but growing team, we hired 2 part-timers, is to really just focus on, these are our revenue streams, and this is where we're going to focus and drill down and what we're going to try to maximize. For us, we're in Brooklyn or New York City, so an important revenue stream for us as a mobile bookstore now, as a brick and mortar, is providing book selling services at offsite events throughout the city, because a lot of other bookstores don't want to deal with it. They don't want to take books on the subway. They don't have cars. It's a pain in the ass in New York to do this stuff. But I have a car and I will take books personally on the subway. I won't make my staff do it, but I'll do it. And so that's been an important stream for us, just trying to get those sales outside of the shop itself. As we get into the warm weather, we are going to do pop-up events again. I'm going to sell books in the park because it's legal to do that in New York, and find those other businesses to partner with and that sort of thing. But for me, having a revenue stream that does not rely solely on foot traffic is important. We have decent foot traffic, but still when the weather's bad and all of New York is hiding in its little apartments and like there's nobody on the streets of Brooklyn, it hurts us because we are also a coffee shop. So like then we don't get the coffee sales. So which is also an important part of it, diversifying our revenue stream was having serving coffee because that margin is great.
Can I just interject a fun fact? Earlier this year, I actually sold books in New York City.
Did you?
Yes, I drove in. I made a lot of money that day because nobody else wanted to do it.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's been very lucrative for us, and it's also been a way for us to build relationships with publishers, which serves our other goal of continuing to book more and more author events and hopefully building towards bundle ticket theater style events. But because I have this plan, I know that like step 1 is doing these offsites. Step 2 is like continue to develop those relationships to have more in-store events. Step 3, when we have more staff and are ready, is how do we get bundle ticket offsites in theaters to make that bigger bang for the buck. But I have this plan that shows me this is my step 1, this is my step 2, and this is my step 3. And that's, I can guesstimate how long each one is going to take, but at least I have that laid out for myself.
Yeah.
I would sort of add a layer of complexity to this bulleted list and say there's also the question of online versus in-store.
Yeah.
So, you have the question of books and sidelines. Is that online or is that in your store? How do you maximize both? And are you doing that through bookshop.org or are you doing that through your own platform? So really you have to look at all those things. And also, I'm going to come back again and be boring and say, look at your budget, because you can't diversify all these at the same time. Diversification is really great, and it really is sort of the best in terms of ensuring when one source of income goes down, you have other things to rely on. But with a limited staff and limited resources, you're not going to be able to maximize these all at the same time. So look at your budget and see how much am I spending and how much am I making from all these different sources. If you're running around spending a lot of time marketing your space rental and you make $1,000 a month, well, then maybe it's just not worth it. And that's something that's going to be added to your list as sort of something in the future when you have extra capacity to really grow it. So really prioritize while you're diversifying because you just can't do it all at the same time.
Right. I would also think about what you don't want to do, which is a long time ago, like 20 years ago, we were doing all the women and gender studies books at Emory University. We would go spend 2 days in what was called the lounge in their department and sell all the books to the department. And then when they got a Barnes & Noble, we weren't allowed to do that anymore. And we were really disappointed because it was something, we got to sell these books we really believed in. And it seemed like this big chunk of money, and it was such a huge amount of work because textbook ordering, even though a lot of it was literature, but a lot of it was not, the margins are terrible. It was not actually. Once we looked at the budgeting around it, we were like, oh, actually, when the next year when we didn't do that, we made more money than the year before, even though we didn't have that income. And when we moved to a building that is owned by Agnes Scott College, which is a trans-inclusive historic women's college. We sell all their sidelines. That is our new side hustle, because sidelines being their swag. So we sell their t-shirts and their sweatshirts and their all of that. But we were like, but we're not selling your textbooks. And we were very clear about it.
Good. So that's an important tip. I want to make sure that we end up with enough time for questions, so we're going to kind of breeze through these next couple of slides. We've already talked a little bit about asking for advice internally and from stakeholders. We want to also highlight that there are plenty of local resources in your community to consult and to take advantage of those entrepreneurship programs, incubator programs, et cetera. And we talked about listening to your community. I don't know if there's anything else we want to add to that before we get into like the
Just quickly,
actions.
one place you can go if you really don't know where to start or don't know what programs are in your community, go look up the Small Business Administration, which has offices in every part of the country. And they have a lot of business plans on their website. They have a lot of workshops on strategic planning and business planning. They seem really dry, and they're, meant for people who want to set up a plumbing business or an electrical business, not necessarily a bookstore, but there are things that can be gleaned from both their website and from their workshops, which are usually free or very low cost. And they're just all over the country, so they're easy to find.
I feel like I want to talk more about here, but I sort of want to get into the, this slide is really important, this idea of being flexible. This is actually what I wanted to say, and I was thinking there wasn't enough time, which is people will give you advice, and there are all of these, what's the word, forms to fill out and structured, I'm losing my language. What's the word when you fill in something templates to fill in, but they, you have to go with what works for you, and don't feel like because it worked for this business over here, this bookstore over here, this is your solution. You have to be flexible and be willing to adapt it to your own situation.
Bookstores are unique.
Yes.
I mean, in terms of consultants also, we've had so many people try to come to us and be consultants, and what they say does not apply to our business.
Exactly.
And it doesn't often apply to a mission-driven business.
Yep.
Yeah. I will just say that my strategic plan winds up being a living document. It's not like I just do it and set it aside. Like we were saying, I look at it regularly. I look at it at the top of every month, when I'm looking, casting forward for the next couple of months, when I'm putting together staff meetings or agendas for a weekly or monthly, I'm looking at that plan and I'm looking at, well, is this working the way we thought it was going to work? And we tried that thing. Okay, actually the metric was terrible. And this is not working. Then what else do we do? But yeah, be flexible for sure. And because then sometimes crises do come up and then you have to adapt the plan around that. But at least you have something to give you direction again and bring you back to what you were focusing on.
So this is the last slide. It's our call to action. There are lots of tips here about what you could leave today to do. Go do one thing. As has been called out several times here, you can't do it all at once. Identify one thing that you've heard today or that this is making you think of to move forward with when you get back to your store. And I think maybe we should just open it up for questions because I feel like we've talked a lot. Anybody want to start? Anybody have a question?
Do you have any tips for introducing and building flexibility into your structures so that you can adapt as the chaos happens?
The first thing that comes to mind for me is making sure that your staff understand, that they know what the mission is, they know what the goals are, and so that they are empowered to make quick decisions on the spot, that they don't have to go running for the manager or for the owner or whatever because customers asking them to, for a refund on something that isn't normally refundable, whatever the thing is, but that they understand the parameters of how far they can go. Can they give a discount, or whatever, to a kid who's coming in and only has $5 for an $8 item? So that sort of flexibility to me is one thing. Are there other versions of this?
Oh, go ahead.
So this may be unpopular. Our biggest expense is personnel. So the greatest way we have flexibility is in having as lean a staff as possible. Because the one principle I always guides my business is it's much easier to hire than to fire. I really rather have a lean staff and figure out a way of getting things done than to have too many people that I can't afford and then figure out what to do next. So being creative in part-time people, in consultants, in contracts, in looking at things as projects, that's really the way I try to be as flexible as possible is by really seeing how I can, connect my staff to what they do best and what they want to do most and make it so that everyone is working together in the most efficient way so that I don't overhire. because overhiring gives me the least flexibility. So it is a question for us of staffing and how to use our staff best, and what is the right sizing, I hate that word, but right sizing of our staff in any given time and in any situation. So that would be my biggest answer on how to be flexible.
I'm not.
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
I'll just add to that one of the biggest tools for flexibility is communication, and making sure that you're talking with your staff, that you have regular meetings, so that people know what's going on, whatever your systems are for communicating with everybody. I know that's a lot, and it's a big task for a lot of bookstores, but if you don't have regular established forms for communication, whether even it's just how, like, what you kind of communicate in a Slack message to everybody every day, or what, whatever, people can't be flexible if they have no idea the sort of things that are coming, that are happening. And so I think that, like, just really focusing on communication, I would say.
You want to say?
No, we can go.
You're oh, okay. Any other questions? One here. Yeah. The mic is coming.
Yeah.
Hi, thanks for what you shared. When you are a really small staff and you are trying to consider whether or not it makes sense to bring another person on part-time, do you think about whether or not you have to get more sustainable in your sales to bring someone on, or whether or not bringing someone on to help strengthen your team would be good for your sales?
Been exactly in that position the last few months. We opened in late October, and we were like, well, maybe we'll hire for the holidays. But then I was like, I didn't want to risk it. I was like, we need a little bit more data. We need a little bit more time to see how this goes. And I was like, it's a 700 square foot store. It's like the smallest bookstore I've ever operated in. It's a fun challenge. But I did wait a little while longer to just really see how the money looked and how the money was coming in. And now, because I'm at this point where I have a lot of events booked, I know kind of some of those paydays that are coming on my calendar. I feel pretty, and business has picked up, and I can see that we're doing well. And I looked at it, I just did the math, and I was like, okay, well, I actually really just need to make another $3,000 a month, and then actually we can afford this person without concern. And I was like, oh, we're going to, I feel confident we're going to do that. It still feels a little bit like a gamble, but I also know, I've done that math. I know what the numbers look like, and I know how much we have in the bank. And I know, it's a little bit of a leap of faith, I think. I think it's hard to avoid that, unless you're really just kind of raking it in right out of the gate all of the time. But for us, yeah, we did really look at it. We were just every month revisiting those numbers and really like how much are we going to pay? What are we really going to offer? What is that really going to look like? Double checking with the accountant about, are we thinking about every little fee that we would have for hiring and all of that. And we did wait a couple of months before we hired. But now, but I feel totally assured about it now because we had done all that research and that math.
And I would just echo what Dan said earlier, which is it is a lot harder to fire somebody than to hire them. And I've made the mistake of overhiring in one case. I thought this individual was going to be a real value add. And it turned out that she ended up having a lot of health issues, and there were fewer and fewer things she was actually able to help me with in the store. And finally, thank goodness, she also recognized it, and she kind of pulled herself out. I kept thinking, how am I going to let her go? It's like, it was so stressing me out. But going forward, I'm definitely being much more careful. People approach me all the time. Do you have work? And I just keep them in a file. Yeah. And one day, maybe one of them will get a job. But yeah, be very, very cautious.
We have several very part-time folks. And I always say to them that we expect flexibility from them, and at the same time we give them a lot of flexibility. And I say that because we do probably 300 events a year, but we don't know when they're happening, right? And so I'm like, some months we are going to need a lot of part-time help, and some months we're not. And we also have some folks that we call our on-call staff that just come in for special events. But that's the trade-off for us, is that we can't guarantee some folks a whole bunch of hours, but at the same time, there's sometimes when we need a lot more help than we sometimes have it on hand.
So I would just also add that think of it in terms of tasks
Yeah.
and think of it in terms of activities that need to be done. So we had a lot of our staff doing bookkeeping and they were not very good at it. So it was much better to hire someone offsite to do QuickBooks offsite than to pay our staff to do it. And then I could free up staff to do other things. We have college students who we hire, give a stipend to do our social media. They have a once a week meeting on our site. They do it offsite. They're perfectly happy. They get a stipend and they don't have to be sitting in our office. And then I don't have to have a 50-year-old scratching his head on how to use Instagram. So, there's lots of different things you can do to get activities off your current booksellers' plates, and try thinking creatively about it. And then you may not need to hire, or you can put off that decision and see whether this works better and how that serves you.
Yeah. To the point of tasks, like when I did hire this person, when I decided to go ahead with it, by then I knew too also exactly which revenue stream they were going to strengthen. That I hired somebody who had experience opening a small coffee shop. And so I know that they're going to be able to put together a nice menu for me. They're going to be able to think in that direction. And that's the thinking that I need done. And that's like, I'm hiring this person specifically to grow that revenue stream. And they'll do other things too, but like being really intentional with it also really helped me be like, okay, I feel more reliable now that this person's skills are actually going to grow this revenue stream.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Maybe we only have 5 minutes left, so let's just start with finish up other questions first, if you don't mind.
Our bookstore struggles with following through. So I was just wondering if any of you have any programs or how do you where do you organize your goals and planning, and how do you make sure that you're actually following through, looking at it, checking back in, because we have loads of plans where we want to test out tables and we want to track certain things. Mm-hmm. We set it up, we get it all organized, but then life happens, the store happens, somebody's sick, I can't, focus on this, I get backed up on other things, and then suddenly it's a month later and I'm like, oh my God, that table's still there and we haven't tracked anything, and now they've changed it out for the season and we've moved on to something else. So how do you?
I think it's going to be that side of the table that has the answer to this question.
I'm sort of brought to mind, there was a session yesterday on to-do lists.
Yeah.
And how do you do to-do lists and how do you use them most effectively? That's not really the whole answer, but I really think the answer is to give yourself grace. I think that can't be overly overstressed, is that you have a lot on your plate. And the fact that you don't follow up on everything, we've all talked about this in terms of, strategic planning is not the first thing you're going to think of when you walk in the door at the beginning of the day. Is just if you can put aside a little bit of time and see this incrementally. So if you feel like you follow up on more things this quarter than you did last quarter, then that's a success. And really, I use the word quarter specifically because if you try to do this week to week and month to month, sometimes that can just be too much. So think of it quarter to quarter. Don't think of it, like, what did I do this week? Look at it in terms of a quarter, because a quarter, if you look at a quarter, 2.5 months into the quarter, you go, I got 2 weeks, I can still do something and have something to cross off the list this quarter, and then plan for next quarter. You just take a time frame that makes sense for you and just give yourself grace to work towards that.
Okay. Do you want to do your follow-up question if there's... was there another question? Okay. Yeah.
I wanted to ask before you, if you have a mission-driven store, really active in community work, did you implement any volunteer streams before you got into hiring?
I totally did. In fact, and I'm not nonprofit. You even have a nonprofit. But that is the only... We had thousands of books in boxes that people had donated, to get us started as mostly a used bookstore. And we were just a week of people just organizing, sorting, loosely pricing things. And even after we opened for the first year and a half, I had volunteers come in, but because we're for profit, it's not really legal just to have people working for free. So I would give them free books. And because they're used, it was really easy. And after a certain period of time, people, I'll take a high school volunteer every so often in exchange for books, but mostly no more volunteers now. We've got the systems under control. But it is the only way we got started, actually, was because we had so many volunteers. And two of them became my longtime employees now. They've been wonderful. All right. Thank you all for sticking with us. Fill out the surveys. Yay. Safe travels.
Thank you for listening to Booked, the bookstore education podcast brought to you by the American Booksellers Association. Don't forget to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast app. Additional educational resources can always be found on the ABA site at www.bookweb.org. Happy reading!